Today is Saturday, May 3rd, 2003, and this is the beginning of an interview with Paul Bratcher at this home at 1603 North Miller Avenue in Marion, Indiana. Paul Bratcher is 74 years old, having been born on May 12, 1928. My name is John Paul Bratcher, and I'll be the interviewer. Paul Bratcher is my grandfather. He is my father's father. Grandpa Bratcher, could you state for the recording what wars and branch of service you served in?
I served in World War II, Korean War, and the Vietnam War. And I joined the United States Navy because I wanted to see the world. And I realized that no one in my family was in the service. This was during wartime. I have 11 brothers and sisters. Nobody was serving in the uniform. So I decided that I would quit high school and join the Navy and do my share. Besides, my father had died and my mother needed a source of income, so I made her out as my dependent and was able to give her a allotment check every month. The reason I joined the Navy was, like I said, to see the world, and I felt like I could contribute to the service of my country.
What was your rank when you joined, and what was your rank when you retired?
When I went to boot camp, I was a seaman recruit, and you stay that way until you graduate from boot training, which is 3 months. And satisfaction completion, they give you seaman second class. And when I retired from the Navy 20 years later, I was a senior chief petty officer.
Where in the world and where in the United States did you serve during your 20 years?
Well, in various places. I was all over the state of California. Being a country boy from Missouri, I hadn't been much, and we went to California, all over that California, Frisco and Oakland, Treasure Island, Mare Island, and then from there I went to Washington, D.C. and was transferred to Navy Proving Ground, a testing center for ammo in Maryland. Stayed there for about 6 months, met a girl that I was wanting to think about getting married. No promotions in the sight, so my commanding officer told me that I should look into aviation schools in Memphis, Tennessee. So I put in for aviation schools in Memphis, Tennessee, and I was transferred there for 4 months and learned how to be a metalsmith, which included welding, painting, hydraulics, and metalwork. And I was being fifth of my class of 65. I got a choice to go in to a couple duty stations, and I picked Trinidad, British West Indies, where we had seaplanes, and I learned how to put my talents to work as far as aircraft maintenance. And then there, I went to Jacksonville, Florida, and got into Attack Squadron VA-15, and we served aboard ship for 2 years, back and forth, 6-month cruises, and then back to Jacksonville, and then back to the cruise in the Mediterranean. There I was left and went to Annapolis, Maryland. I was at Annapolis, Maryland for 3 years. Each cadet had received 9 hours of flight time. So we had 4,000 cadets, and we had to have the planes ready for them to fly at least 9 hours apiece. So they would be introduced to aviation, and then if they were liked it and they did a good job, they would go to Pensacola and then they learn how to fly jets and become Navy pilots. From 3 years of that, I went to went to Oceana, Virginia, and got into a squadron called VA 83, and we had attack planes, jets, attack plane A4D, and we flew the atomic bomb if we needed to. We made idiot loops with the airplane to toss the bomb 20 miles away from the plane if it went off. And we did that training in the Mediterranean, for firing our guns into sleds towed behind aircraft carrier. And upon completion of that tour of duty, I went to Patuxent River, Maryland, where we had new airplanes, and we'd test them to do certain altitudes, certain type of equipment, certain type of landing gears, tail hook. We simulated landing on aircraft carriers, and we had to have good maintenance for the aircraft so the pilots could be feel safe and do a good job. And then from Patuxent River, Maryland, we went back to Oceana and got into the same squadron that I was in before, VA 83, Attack Squadron 83, but we had different aircraft. We had the F7U3, and later we went into back to the A4D, but I was specialized then in maintenance chief, in charge of all the maintenance of the aircraft. And there our squadron completed many hours of landings, sorties, many hours of flying time, which our squadron won the efficiency for excellency in all categories. We won the safety and the most flight hours, most landings, no accidents for 2 years. Upon completion of that, my commanding officers recommended me for a special medal and Navy Secretary Achievement Award, the Navy Merit Badge, and with that I was able to to make senior chief petty officer and still in maintenance control. Then I was transferred from there to VA 42, which is Attack Squadron 42, and we trained pilots for the AD, the A6A, A6E, which is electronic equipment, to go to Vietnam and drop many bombs, and they were able to go in all kinds of weather because of the special equipment we had on the aircraft. Several planes were shot down and several pilots were taken as prisoners, but we, considering the tens of thousands of sorties and bombs dropped, our squadron, from the training they received at Oceana and the training squadron, VA 42, were able to achieve a good record and do a good job. And then I was retired into inactive Fleet Reserve. As I left the Navy to go into other endeavors, I decided to be with my 3 boys. Decided I wanted to be there with them when they went to college and to be able to supervise them. I went into the post office, so I made another career into the post office because I needed a second career. I loved the Navy, and it was good for me.
Okay, so when you first enlisted, did you go straight to boot camp, or was there a waiting period after you signed up before you went to boot camp?
Well,
I was anxious to go to serve my country and anxious to get going, so I talked my recruiter into getting my physical and my test all done. And the day I was 17, old enough to go in, I was sworn in and sent directly to boot camp. We went by troop train, and a couple hundred of us went to San Diego to start our boot training. The first 3 weeks, we had to take shots. In fact, one day we took 5 or 6 shots, and then we had to do calisthenics and march the next day. And then the next day after that, we were in medical, getting our teeth checked, and I had 4 teeth pulled and 4 or 5 filled, and went right back to calisthenics again with the rifle, marching. But it was very competitive. With we tried to outdo each other, and squads and as companies. We had 150 people in our company, and there was a company coming in every week, and we were trying to be the best without any accidents, without any people getting hurt or going to sick bay or to take time off. We had a good enthusiasm, and like I say, I and several others came into for competition and trying to do the best we could.
So, how long did boot camp last? Did you say 3 weeks?
First 3 weeks was called a trial time. You went through shots and stress. We didn't even go to sleep first couple of weeks or in our beds, trying to see if we were made it for the Navy, and they didn't want any people that couldn't take the stress. After 3 weeks of that, then we started going into marching, drilling, learning battle techniques, firefighting. We took a 25-mile hike, ate lunch, and then walked back the 25 miles, and we did it without any. The ambulance was following us behind, and not one of them dropped out. We had the spirit, and we enjoyed boot training. I know I did, and we had to wash our own clothes by hand. We hang them up on a line with pieces of twine or thread. We tied each one with a square knot. And then we would get inspected by our company commander, and we could get merits or demerits for and then anything that they found wrong, and we could or good. Our bunks would be made every morning, maybe by 5 o'clock, 5:30, and you could drop a quarter on it and it would bounce. If you didn't bounce a quarter, you would get a couple of demerits, and if you got so many demerits, then you had to do your 2-3 weeks over and start all over again. So it was competition, hard work, but I enjoyed it all the way.
Did you ever have any demerits or special merits stories?
I got several demerits for having my bunk made extra good, or cleaning up my part of the barracks or the restroom, or what we call the head, our restroom or bathroom we call the head. And I had picked up more merits than I did demerits. If you, like I said, if you got, I think it was 100 demerits, then you had to go back into the next company or the company 2 weeks later or whatever. And like I say, though, most of our men, our buddies, we had pride and we did our job good, and we mostly got merits, just like they do in the Navy Academy. The Navy Academy is you go to 4 years there with a certain amount of merits and or demerits, and it's good for competition, and it's good for enthusiasm and zeal in your efforts.
What was your favorite exercise during boot camp that you just loved to do, or what was your least favorite?
Well, we used to take a rifle and do calisthenics. We'd go up over our head, down to the ground, sideways, back raise. I think it was a 48 point we did, and we do that for a couple hours. And then we'd had jumping jacks. We did push-ups. We climbed
walls, climb rope, which is the Navy called line. You don't call it rope. Everything you did in the Navy had the rope was lined, and the floor was decked. The wall was a bulkhead. The ceiling was an overhead. The doors were called hatches. The ladder was for the stairs, and we had to learn to use those names, or we could get demerits for that. And if we slipped and said, you drop something on the floor, we'd get a demerit. We should say deck. And so, therefore, after even 40 years after I retired from the Navy, I still go for bulkhead and ladder and deck and the head, and it's really quite interesting to compete with each other in the knowledge that you we'd even have a whistle aboard ship to tell us when we wanted to sweep our compartment down, or to reveille, or for chow, or for bedtime. We always had, when they lowered the flag or raised the flag, they blew a trumpet. So we always had a code in everything that we did.
So after graduation from boot camp, where were you first stationed?
I went to Mare Island from boot training, and I was hoping to get a ship, but they sent me into the ammo depot, and we loaded ammo on the ships. And then as the ships came back for a new load, they'd have a lot of duds, or they'd have bombs and different type of ammo that wasn't needed. So we took that off, and whatever the commanding officer wanted, that's what we'd load back on. We used big trucks, cranes, dollies, and I volunteered to take the driver. They asked if anybody had drove a truck, and I said, yeah, I drove one in a farm. So they gave me the job of driving the truck, hauling ammo back and forth, and that was my tour duty there was strictly unloading and loading ships. Then the war was over. Then we was transferred into Treasure Island, unloading ships of personnel and equipment, and I drove a bus. They asked if anybody drove a bus before, and I said, yeah, I drove a bus. And I drove a bus all the time I was in Treasure Island, which I enjoyed that duty because we were across the water from Alcatraz, and we could see the prisoners, and any problem was over there. They had a lot of fights and fires, and we enjoyed being in part of San Francisco Valley and Oakland. It was quite an experience.
So how long were you in Mare Island and Treasure Island?
Well, it's over a year. I don't exactly remember the dates. But then waiting to be either discharged or reassigned. The war was over, and they go by points. If you had a certain age, so many, if you married and had so many kids. I was single, and I was young, and I hadn't been in service long. I was then transferred to Washington, D.C. in December of 96, 46. And there I was reassigned for further duty.
So what was your duty in Washington, D.C.?
The duty there was just, it's called temporary duty. There, I had met my girlfriend, and I wanted to get liberty every night. So I volunteered to be a mess cook on the served food and did work in the kitchen. And I had every night liberty. And 6 weeks of that, I was assigned to Trinidad, not Trinidad, I'm sorry. I went to Navy Proving Ground, Dahlgren, Virginia. And there we were put on a small Coast Guard ship and patrolling the rivers, Bay of Chesapeake, while the Navy was testing different rockets and guns and bombs, and at that point, they even tested the 16-inch guns that for the aircraft carrier. We kept fishing boats and civilians out, and I was assigned to the Coast Guard cutter as a deckhand and a cook. I was asked if I knew how to cook, and I said yes, I cook hot dogs. Well, I got the job as the cook and the deckhand, and enjoyed that very much. But there's no promotions ahead. No promotions. My boss told me that if I wanted a promotion, then I'd better get out of there and go to aviation schools, which would be the quickest. And I volunteered then to go to Memphis, Tennessee, after about 6 months, and went into aviation school to be maintenance and aircraft maintenance, welding, painting, metal work, and seat injections, all sorts of cables and repair of aircraft. There I went to school for 4 months and came out number 3 in my class, and I was. They had different places that you could go to, and I was able to pick. 2 went to first place, and then I got the second choice, which was Trinidad, British West Indies. I went down there.
So, what were the type of skills that you learned in Memphis that you liked the best and came easiest to you?
Well, I think some of the most enjoyable and most experience that I had that would help me was repair of the fuselage and the skin. Put new damage was we put new skin on and drove rivets and repaired hydraulic cylinders and put brakes on airplanes and painting and cadmium plating the airplane before you parts it. Before you painted it, you learn how to put a corrosive preventative solution on the metal, and then you would paint it. And sometimes you had to put the metal with curves and stuff. And that was soft, and then you had it run it through an oven and heat treated it to a certain temperature to make it strong and as the rest of the airplane was, and that was part of my job, which was very interesting to do. I learned that in school.
Do you have any stories of when a plane would come in and you'd have to have it ready and fixed up by the next day, and you were up all night or anything?
When I was in VA-15, I was a troubleshooter on the flight deck, and before the plane got airborne, the pilot would start the engine, and I was the last man that looked at the airplane, made sure there was no fluid, no fuel, tires were okay, everything was ready to go, and then I put my thumbs up to the signaling officer, and he'd tell the pilot all okay, and then he'd launch the airplane. And then when they returned, I was the first man that got to look at the airplane and see if there's any damage, any leaks, or any thing wrong with it that would cause the airplane to go down. And if it was ready to go to the next flight, then we turned it around and kept it on the flight deck. But if I found something wrong with it, we sent it down into the hangar deck below, and then they kept it down there for a day or 2 days, or whatever it took to fix it. So that job was considered a very, I found it to be very satisfying, because the pilots, I respected the pilots, and the pilots respected me for my judgment, and you had to make a quick decision. Either you go or you're down the airplane, and I found that to be very challenging. As a second class petty officer, I did that, and then I was promoted to first class, and then I took over as a check crew leader, which I lost that job, but that was probably my best experience I had. Exciting time on aircraft carrier. I'd be there when they launched of the airplane, I'd be there when the recovery, and I was around the steam catapults, and I was there with all the action.
So what aircraft carrier were you serving on at that time for VA-15?
Well, I went on the USS Intrepid, and then the USS Coral Sea. And then
about 3 years later, I went with the same squadron again on the USS Forrestal, and we did 2 tours of duty on the Forrestal, about 8 months each time, to the all over Europe, Mediterranean, Turkey, Yugoslavia, went to Cuba, Puerto Rico, around Africa. We just the aircraft carriers, they really do cover a lot of area.
So, about what year is this when you're serving on the Forrestal and the Intrepid and the Coral Sea? Was this before the Korean War or during the Korean War?
Well, this was actually during the Korean War and Vietnam War. We had to have half our Navy over in Vietnam War, Korean War, and then we'd have half in the Mediterranean. We'd over there protecting, keeping the country in order over there. So unfortunately, I got to spend my whole time in the Mediterranean or in that area instead of getting into Vietnam and Korea. Though we had be ready to go in case they needed us. Some of the ships were called because they were shorthanded or because of damage to other aircraft or something, or planes, or the ships, they would be called. But unfortunately, I complained about having to stay over there, but the powers that be said that we were doing the job that Washington, D.C. or the Navy Department wanted us to do, so we made the best of it.
What exactly was your job over there in the Mediterranean? What do you mean by protecting the other parts of the...
Well, we keep other countries in line of showing them our power, or that we were organized, that we had the equipment and we had what was needed to keep countries that maybe want to take over another country, like Iraq. They took over Kuwait. Well, and we were there to be able to stop that. But we were in Cuba when they had the Cuba crisis, or we were in Grenada to put that uprising down. And that's the purpose of being over there, is to make known to the world that we were a powerful navy, a powerful country, and we were there to help them or to keep them in line.
So while you were in the Mediterranean, did you get to actually travel around any of the countries, or were you mainly on the ship?
I enjoyed the Mediterranean immensely. I got to see bullfights, several bullfights in Spain. Got to see the Leaning Tower of Pisa in Italy. I got to see the mausoleums in Rome. I got to see the pyramids in Egypt. I got to see all the Colosseums in Athens, Greece, or all over Greece. Got to see a lot of Africa and countries that was torn up from World War II, and watched them rebuild part of the country, and there's a lot of poverty and a lot of need there.
Okay, you want me to repeat what I said about?
This is a continuation of the last question. Grandpa, when you were in the Mediterranean, what places did you get to see while you were stationed there, and what kind of things would you do?
We'd go out to sea in the Mediterranean for a week, and we had heavy training, 3-4 days without even stopping. And then after we would pull our planes or carrier back into port, France, Germany, Egypt, Yugoslavia, or Spain, we'd go in there for a week for repair and rest and recreation. We would get our planes back in good shape so that we could go out for another week or 2 weeks, depending on the schedule. We'd go into places like Barcelona, Spain, Portugal, and we'd be there a week. So we would take 1/3 of the crew could go on liberty. We go to bullfights and tours, hikes to the beaches, shopping. And then we'd go to Genoa, Italy. We'd go to Sicily. We go to Nice, Cannes, France, and go on the French Riviera. We've been to Yugoslavia and going up to the mountains there where the families would invite us over for community parties. We went to Turkey, Istanbul, Turkey, and was able to communicate with the Turks and their form of their way of life. And we went on tours, and we also went to Athens, Greece, and Philippi, and saw all the ruins of Greece that the Romans had tore up. And we also went to the Leaning Tower of Pisa in Italy, Pisa, and then we'd seen the ruins of Pompeii, which was the city was covered by ash from the volcano. They cleaned it all out and is now open for tours. We been to Rome, seeing the Colosseums. You take as much liberty or leave as you could afford, or depends on your job. My job, I was very conscious of my job, so I didn't take as much time off as I would have liked. I stayed home on the ship and made sure the airplanes were in good shape and ready to go when we went back out to sea. Because we go back out to sea, we'd be in competition with our sister squadron, and so our plane should be in good shape and 100% ready to go, rested. The crew rested, and so we could do another 2 weeks. So sometimes we fly around the clock 4 days in a row. So we did a lot of heavy training, bombing a sled that's tied behind 1,000 yards behind our carrier. We'd bomb it, shoot it, shoot down drones, fire our guns, ship's guns, and our aircraft guns, and we did a lot of heavy training over there, and it was exciting, interesting, and also very satisfying, and also very tiring too.
So once the Vietnam War was finished and you were done in the Mediterranean and over in Europe, where did you go, or where were you stationed?
Well, I went back to VA 42 in Oceana, Attack Squadron 42. The Vietnam War was in its prime, and we had new airplanes called the A6 A, which is the Intruder. It was a combination bomber, and it had guns on it. It could do a lot of strafing, but it mainly did a lot of bombing. We trained pilots for 6-9 months in that airplane, and then they went aboard different carriers and go to Vietnam and were capable of doing the job that was needed out there. And then after 2 years of that, I had my 20 years in the Navy. I decided to get out, become a civilian and get another career, young enough to get another career so I could be with my growing families, send them to college and be able to be around them, supervise them, and enjoy them. And so after 20 years, they gave me a big going away party and inspection that I was able to inspect the troops, and then they give a going away speech, and then I got to give my thoughts about my time in the past 20 years, and I told them that it had been a very satisfying 20 years of hard work, and I had a lot of good duties. I think Navy Academy and Patuxent River and a test pilot school there where we test new airplanes was probably be my two satisfying career duty. I was also a leader, and I was also able to put my talents to work. And I received several promotions and several medals. And as I went out of the Navy, my friends, my pastor of my church, and my family were there for the commencement of my retirement.
So through your 20 years, what medals did you receive, and could you give me the importance or the description of these medals?
The medal that I received that I'm proud of, extra proud of, was the Secretary of Navy Achievement Award that called the Navy Merit Badge, come from performance of outstanding performance of duty for a period of 2 years when I was in the Attack Squadron 83 as a maintenance control chief. That medal there I earned from my performance, but the other medals I received was good conduct. Every 4 years you get a good conduct medal, and I received 5 of them during my 20 years, which I was proud of that. But then being in the Navy, in the service, during World War II, they give you World War II medal because we were in the service during that time. And then while we were on active duty, they gave us American Campaign and American Defense Medal. As we performed our duties, they gave us these medals to remind everybody that we were in the service during World War II. And then I went to Europe, and then I received the European Occupation Medal, and then I received the Vietnam Medal because I was in the service during Vietnam. Now I mentioned that not everybody can be in Vietnam. We're overtraining in the Mediterranean. We're doing our job in case they need us. We could rush over there and we'd be ready to go, and we able to train pilots to fly over in Vietnam. And so they gave me a Vietnam medal. I've had a total of 6 medals, which the Good Conduct Medal is very important to get your promotions. If you didn't have good conduct, you wouldn't be able to get your promotions when they were come around. But the Navy Merit Badge, the Secretary of Navy, they don't come around very often, and I was very fortunate to receive this medal and this award.
So, did they give ribbons that you would wear with your normal dress, or did you wear those medals all the time?
We would receive medals for each award. We wore them on our dress uniform or change of command. But for our regular Liberty uniform, we used ribbons, and they were the same color, only they were bars that you put on your chest. The medals were strictly for special occasions.
So, through your 20 years, do you have a most memorable experience or one that sticks out in your mind as your favorite or anything?
Well, I've had a lot of good times and good memories of the service, places I've been, and I think being in Trinidad, British West Indies, I had my wife down there with me. We lived on the edge of a jungle where the baboons were fighting in the trees. They'd wake us up in the morning. Swimming pool right there. Weapons carried to take us to the movies, to the commissary, and we worked tropical working hours. And I was able to express my talents, or to show my talents more there than it was any place, because there was only 2 of us in that job rating, and I was the senior man of the 2. We'd tear an airplane down, landing gear, take it off, put it back on after we tested it out, or put a new one on. And the pilot would say,
crew leader has to fly with me on the test flight. So we got to fly when we did our job there, and was able to draw flight pay, overseas pay, and it was probably my best tour of duty as far as satisfaction.
What was it like marching down on your day of retirement, marching down the aisle with the chiefs on the side saluting you? What was that like?
Well, it's hard to express how you feel when you're in military life. You sign over your life to the military for a period of 4 years, 6 years, and then when that time expires, you sign it over again. But when you get your final retirement papers and the commanding officer says a job well done, you feel a great pressure off your shoulders, or you know then, hey, I'm free. I don't have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, or I don't have to go to bed at be ready for the next day, or my decisions are going to be for me and my family instead of for the country. And it was a tremendous responsibility when you have as many as 400, 600 men that you were responsible for in their work. And the type of work we did was, pilots were flying the airplanes, so we had to be careful, we had to be good, and that was my responsibility, to make sure the job was done right, and that load was off of my shoulders. And hearing the commanding officer say a job well done was very satisfaction, and my family and friends got to see a little bit of what military life was about.
One last question. What was it like waking up within the next week and thinking, being so used to being in the Navy and having to get up and command those 400 or 600 seamen or officers, and then realizing that you've just been in the Navy for 20 years and you're now retired and you get to start what could be called a new life?
Well, at first, I got a rocking chair, put it out underneath the shade tree. 2 days I set my rocking chair thinking about what I had done in the past, what needs to be done in the future. Did I make the right decision? I had a chance to go back into service the next day if I wanted to. You have 30 days without losing any privileges. You could go back in and serve for another 6 years if you wanted to, or whatever. I was excited that I was able to be loose from all the stress from the service, and I was thinking about taking 30 days and just loaf, but about the third day, and I decided I'm not even going to go fishing. I'm going to look for a job, and I started working then at the post office, and which I did a career of 25 years later on in that.
Well, thank you for doing this interview for me. I really appreciate it and enjoyed it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And hope everything goes well. Thank you.